As a lot of Metroidvanias do, Zapling Bygone drops you onto an unknown alien world that requires you to piece together the story. The only thing that you're sure of is that you play as a Zapling, which is part of a larger hive. The hive has been disrupted by a parasite, so it's your job to find the origins of said parasite. This game clearly tries to be a Hollow Knight-like, and it is in many ways, but it also does a few things differently. So let's jump into my thoughts to see if Zapling Bygone could be a game for you. It's clear this game is atmospherically heavy from the beginning, as you don't hear much music. It's more of just the ambiance, and I think this is a good thing, as it makes the world feel more alive rather than just being a backdrop. The first area you'll discover is the Rat Queen Gardens, and this is full of, you guessed it, rats. I was a bit disappointed in the enemies' design in this game and the difficulty. I mean, they were literally just rats, but that's not too much of a gripe, as they did all suit their environment, making them feel organically connected. And speaking of connected, the overworld map is easy to read and the transition between areas are smooth and happen naturally, and this carries throughout the remainder of the game. Besides the underbelly area, most sections were pretty linear by design, which is usually not what you want for Metroidvania. You don't have to go out of your way much to find the path forward, but you will have to return to areas with new abilities if you are wanting to collect certain items or piece together the lore of the planet. Zapling Bygone took the Hollow Knight approach by indirectly explaining the story through characters and pieces of the environment. I had a great time exploring the Rat Queen's gardens to discover what exactly happened to them, and this makes you feel more connected to that environment. So I appreciated the little details of lore that were added to elevate the overall experience of the game. When you add the lore, the setting becomes more than just a backdrop. It becomes a part of the story. I'm always grateful for the pixelated art style, and I think it was used here to create a darker tone for the game that displays a collapsed society and world. And it's funny because I feel like a lot of Metroidvanias enjoy doing this collapsed society thing. But what's great about this is it felt like each area meant something, and I'd say my primary issue with the atmosphere is that no area felt too unique from one another. I'd say the only exceptions to this are the Rat Queen's Gardens and the ancient sewers. I thought that every area had their own themes, but I didn't really find anything significantly different from one another besides the setting and enemies. I just felt like the colors were changed a bit, and I know that's not completely accurate, but during my playthrough, I wasn't blown away by any particular area. And as I mentioned, the lore makes each environment more memorable, and the ambiance does a great job immersing you in the experience. So despite the lack of variety, the atmosphere in this game is still very appealing. After just looking at the trailer, I was a bit hesitant about the gameplay and was really more just intrigued by the atmosphere. But after playing through it, I can now say that I was pleasantly surprised with my experience. Zapling Bygone doesn't offer anything groundbreaking in terms of gameplay, but it does offer a smooth and sometimes challenging style of combat. The combat definitely did remind me of Hollow Knight, but when you attack enemies, they won't be kicked back as much. You obtain skulls from defeating bosses that grant you new abilities such as climbing, range attacks, and more. So it's the typical Metroidvania formula where you defeat a boss, gain an ability, and now you have access to new areas. I actually had a fun time changing my skulls, but more for display than anything else. You'll also find ruins scattered throughout the map as well, and this did remind me of the charm system in Hollow Knight. I would say the rune system is probably the biggest drawback to the gameplay. It doesn't make the experience any worse, but it also doesn't add anything besides some satisfaction from discovering them. I ended up almost never using the runes because in a lot of cases, it makes the combat more challenging when usually things like this are supposed to be beneficial. The core of the gameplay is simple and involves a lot of attacking your enemy and dodging their attacks. I wouldn't call it too challenging, but it isn't a walk in the park either. The enemy's attack patterns are easy to read for the most part, and besides the boss fights, you're able to find plenty of time to heal up. The combat in Zapling Bygone is exactly what it looks like in the trailer. Nothing more, nothing less, but still a satisfying and fairly challenging experience. But something that can make or break a Metroidvania are its bosses, so let's talk about it. I find boss fights to be both subjective and objective, as different games attempt to accomplish different things. In this case, most bosses have a story to tell and are part of the lore of the world. However, you will only understand this if you go out of your way to find some of the collectibles within the game, but doing this amplifies and builds up the encounter that you will eventually have with them. So yes, I would recommend collecting the pieces scattered throughout each area, as it really does help build that story of each boss. The core fights are challenging and become harder as you progress. They each have a unique moveset and do not offer you much time to ever heal. Something I appreciated was the phase of the fights. As you take away their health, they'll begin to throw in different attack patterns or become more aggressive. This may be common in a lot of titles, but it's a little detail that's important in the making of great boss fights. I enjoyed each boss in Zapling Bygone from a gameplay standpoint, but I didn't find any of the designs to be too appealing. You have a rat, a bacteria blob, and a robot with an eye. These were pretty basic in terms of design, but it still won't take away from your experience with the game. My favorite fight was actually with the Burdened. I thought it was a creative take to not allow you to attack them. You have to dodge their attacks for a certain amount of time to beat them, and this proved to be challenging. I think I was a little confused and maybe disappointed at first, but after dying a few times, I began to enjoy the fight. And the Burden will antagonize you throughout the whole portion of the game, so it's nice to finally put an end to them. One last thing I'll add for this category is the final boss. I was a little disappointed that there was not a single big bad at the end, and instead you were forced to fight 3 variations of the parasite. They were definitely difficult to face. I'm just personally not the biggest fan of the concept. Zapling Bygone will keep you engaged for the duration of its playthrough. If you're a completionist, then you should have plenty of collectibles to find and areas to explore. However, the game isn't too long if you're just looking to complete the story, but there's still a handful of different settings and bosses to explore and fight. I recommend this game if you enjoy a darker setting, fun bosses, and an atmospheric soundtrack. I just want to say thank you to Nine Finger Games, who is the solo dev for releasing this title, and I look forward to anything else you may create in the future. This was my first review in a while, and I'm in the middle of playing a few new games, but I may decide to make a video essay instead and go away from this reviewing format to focus more on specific aspects of the games. As for Zapling Bygone, I highly recommend it if you're looking for a quick pickup of a Metroidvania. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, as I will hopefully get back to being more consistent here soon. Peace out.